In September 2020, I was informed that I would no longer be employed due to COVID. COVID has impacted many lives, not only in America, not only in Texas, but worldwide. And I was no different. I wasn't special. I could have taken that opportunity to enter into a dark place of sadness and loneliness and depression and all of those. However, it was the people right here at Gateway that really helped settle me and reset me and center me to refocus on the things that I had been longing for a long time. I actually got a chance to serve more on guest services, not just twice a month, but every Sunday that I'm in town. I actually got a chance to connect with others in the church, got a chance to connect with Pastor Carlos, and having people like him who actually have, taken the time to pray for me and my future, and that has really paid off. I've actually gotten the opportunity to pour more into a business that I had that I had started a year previous, and now we get a chance to take that business to the next level. And in 2021, we're hoping and praying that Lead Creative Group is well sought out there, and it is with the prayers of the team at Gateway that is going to make that all possible. So we're thriving in 2021, and I can't wait.
Well, welcome to Gateway Church, and we're so glad that you are with us. If nobody's told you so far, I'm sure somebody has told you at this point, but Happy New Year. We're glad that you're with us here at Gateway, and that video is by Darius Thomas. You're going to hear more about Darius here in a few minutes, and I love him. He's my boy. He attends our North Campus. Love that guy. He's an Ole Miss grad, so hotty toddy. I think that's what they say if you're Ole Miss grad. And I'm telling you, he has a great story, and he is a great part of our campus here at North. I did want to let you know that as I was listening to him talk, I was thinking about so many stories at Gateway. As campus pastors, we get to share with one another stories from all of our different campuses, no matter where you attend. And even if you're watching online, when you submit your stories, we get to read those and we get to share those and celebrate those. And a matter of fact, a few weeks ago, we did a baptism at our North Campus, and people who came from online, who had never been to a Gateway campus, showed up to a physical location to get baptized for the very first time. And so a lot of things to celebrate, and that's what we did in 2020. If you weren't here the last few weeks, maybe this is your first Sunday with us. We ended 2020 really celebrating how God used so many of us, how many God used you, not only through your service, some of you in your giving, leading groups and doing what you do to truly make a difference. And then last week, one of our youth pastors, Ricky Ecciona, by the way, that was not me. All right, not all brown people look alike, okay? Ricky Ecciona, with the big hair, did a great message about centering and finding Jesus at the center of our lives. And that's how we ended the year, just kind of celebrating all the good things that God had done in the year in the middle of 2020. Because in 2020, it really did feel like a roller coaster. As I was preparing for the message, that thought came to my mind, like it was like a roller coaster. And some people are like, yeah, but I like roller coasters. Right? I like change, and I like things that are going on. Yeah, but this was a different kind of roller coaster. You know how when you're on the roller coaster, and it's your first time on the big scary coaster, whatever that looks like. My favorite amusement park, grew up in the Midwest for a few years, and so Cedar Point in Sandusky, Ohio was my favorite amusement park, and they had the biggest, craziest coasters. And you get on the big one you're scared of, and you finally come down, and you're getting ready to get off, and they just push reset. I don't know what they do, and you go on for a second time while everybody else is waiting in line. That's what 2020 felt like, except for it didn't go twice or 3 times or 4 times. It went on for months, and it's still going on. The roller coaster really hasn't ended. And yet, so much was impacted. Our emotions got impacted. Our finances were impacted. Political views, social views, education, children were impacted, marriages, life groups. Everything was on the table in 2020. And I wrote this down. I stole it from somebody, so I just want to make sure you know that it's not my thought. They said this: we woke up with resiliency that turned into apathy, which transformed into anger. It made us laugh with disbelief, like, I cannot believe this is going on, cry with despair, fight like the world was against us, and most days, many of us were just glad we were somewhat surviving. Well, as a church, I hope you know that we too were on the coaster with you. And we didn't like it either. I mean, the amount of emails and phone calls and people really most people were really encouraging, hey, we're praying for you as you make decisions for our church. And some people weren't as grace-filled, and some people used language you probably shouldn't use in front of children to describe me and Pastor John, but that's okay, we love you anyway. But we also recognize that God was doing something in the middle of that, and that through that, families were being rebuilt, and people were being restored, and thousands of families were literally being fed. And we came to a point where we began to hold on to the fact that God was moving in us. And today, friends, we as a church are making a decision. Hence a hoodie. I never wear a hoodie on Sunday morning. It's not because of a religious thing, but it's just, the mic and all that kind of stuff. But today, we made sweatshirts because I want you to know this is a time in our church we're deciding, we're putting our foot in the ground and saying, we have survived long enough. We have tried to hold on long enough. And we really believe that this is a year where God has said, okay, you survived the first wave or the second wave or the third wave, but maybe, just maybe, it's time to now thrive in the middle of uncertainty. And that's what we're going to do as a church. We are going to thrive. Our staff, key volunteers have been working for this coming season because we really believe that from now till Easter season, we are going to set everyone up online, at home, in the room, in person, to thrive in the coming months. And you're going to hear more about how that's going to unfold from now till Easter. But I want you to know that we have made this decision that it's enough. Enough is enough. We're done with surviving. Let's now thrive. This is not about in-person attendance. This is not about wearing a mask or not wearing a mask. This is not about the inauguration, who's going to end up being president. It's not about any of that. It's about you. It's about your family. It's about your spouse, your roommate, your sons, your daughters, your mom, your dad, you personally saying, I am done with surviving. I'm willing to thrive. I'm ready for the next thing. This does not mean that we're going to ignore the challenges that we still face. But it does mean that those challenges do not define who we are or the purpose that God has for us. We lift our eyes from the obstacles and we look towards God and the path set before us. I'm going to read a couple scriptures. I'm going to give you a little context and background, and then we're going to dive into a passage this morning. Proverbs 29:18 says this: when there is no revelation or vision, people cast off restraint, but blessed is the one who needs wisdom's instruction. Then another version says this: and when people do not accept divine guidance, they run wild. How about this? When people do not accept divine guidance, they buy too much toilet paper. When people do not accept divine guidance, they hoard their food. When people do not accept divine guidance, they only think about themselves. When people do not accept divine guidance, they get in traffic accidents when nobody's on the road right now. I read an article, it's not even in my notes. The New York Times yesterday put an article out that in 2020, there were more accidents on the road with no cars on the road. There were more tickets given in 2020 than in 2019 with nobody on the road. Why? Because people got in their cars and there was no traffic and they lost all sense of normalcy and they got dumb. And so they thought, there's no cars on the road. I can go 100 miles an hour. There's no cars on the road. There's no way I'm going to get in an accident. How embarrassing if you got in an accident and nobody was on the road with you. Because when people cast off wisdom, when people cast off restraint, they run wild. But whoever obeys the law is joyful. See, it's this mindset. Thriving is a mindset. We're going to dive into what it really means, but talking about mindset and intentionality, I want to throw out a few quotes that really have impacted me through this season. First one is J.P. Morgan, and he says this: the first step towards getting somewhere is to decide you're not going to stay where you are. Hello. I decided early on in COVID, I was going to come out better shape than I'd ever been in my entire life. And at first, it was awesome. We were walking every day. There was nobody out. We were going after it. And now, I am 10 pounds heavier than when I started. And it's not muscle, people. It's not muscle. How about this one? Nido Kubain, who's a Middle Eastern businessman who was the president of a university in North Carolina, he said this: your present circumstances don't determine where you can go. They merely determine where you start. And then one of my favorites, Maya Angelou, says this: and if you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change your attitude. I stopped drinking Cokes a while ago, and during COVID, I started drinking Cokes again. For those of you from the Midwest, that's called pop, right? Pop. Soda. And my daughter was really upset with me. My daughter hasn't had a drop of anything but water in like 6 years. And she's 14. And she was my accountability. She saw me drinking Coke and she's like, I'm so disappointed in you. What kind of father are you? I'm like, it's just a soda, sweetheart. She's like, I know. You've just lost all moral ground in my life. So, I haven't had a Coke in 2 days. Right? Right. I'm trying to do what's right. Because really, the Coke is, it's just, but it's more the mindset. It's the attitude that I just kind of gave in. So what does it really mean to thrive? I was reading and researching a researcher, funny that, right? I'm researching a researcher. His name's Daniel Brown, University of Portsmouth in England. And he did something really interesting. He took 13 studies over the last 20 years, well, from 1995 to 2014, over 19 years, he took 13 studies in psychology, about psychology in England, and he compiled them, and he was looking for what are the common traits that were found by psychologists in the United Kingdom over those 19 years. And he compiled a list of words talking about thriving. How do people survive? How do they not just survive, but thrive? How do they go beyond where they currently are? And as I was reading the findings, there was some context about the etymology. And etymology means the root of a word, right? Where does the word come from? And the etymology of the word thrive. And it begins in Old Norse. In Old Norse, the word thrive means to grasp. Literally, just to grasp, to understand. And then in Middle English, the word evolved a little bit, and it word to increase or grow. So the word thrive went from grasping, understanding something, to now growing something. And now the English word is synonymous with prospering, success, blossoming, flourishing. So that's the etymology of the word thrive. And so now as Professor Brown is going through thousands of pieces of information to find out what are the commonalities of people who are thriving. What does it look like when people are thriving? There are 9 words that he found that were common in all 13 studies over 20 years. 9 words. And I'm going to share those with you today because I want us to understand what their findings were. Number 1, the word was optimism. They have an optimistic take on things. Number 2, there's motivation. Motivation is the ability to say, what gets me out of my seat? What gets me out of bed? What motivates me? Number 3, they were proactive. There's a time to react, and there's time to be proactive, to get ahead of the curve. Number 4, the enjoyment of learning. Some of you have the gift of learning, and some of you are really upset because your children have the gift of learning and they're their 7th year of undergrad in college, right? Like the gift of learning. They enjoy learning. Number 5, flexibility. They're pliable, they're flexible. Number 6, adaptability. They adapt to different situations and circumstances. They have a survival mentality. Nothing's going to stop them. And number 7, social competency. We'll leave that right there because some of us really struggle with social competency. And number 8, self-esteem. There's something about them that says, I can do this. We can overcome whatever adversity is there. Now, I know I said there were 9, and I'm going to get to the 9th one here in a second. But before I do, I want us to understand the first 8. Because in this study, what I was reading was there was this focus in the 20th century, an early part of the 21st century, on positivity in the psychological world, and studying and researching this positivity and how to be kinder to people, anti-bullying, how to not be mean, how to really understand oneself and interact with other people. And these in and of themselves are not really bad things, they're actually really good things. That we would fight for other people and we would not let them be marginalized. There was this focus on positivity. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. However, I want you to understand that as a church, if you are a believer in Christ, and even if you're here and you're trying to figure out this whole God thing, this whole church thing, we're not called merely to be more positive. We're not supposed to be just good people. We don't just work and to prove ourselves to other people. No, our challenge is much bigger than being positive. Our challenge is bigger than just being nice to people and accepting the challenge to be kind. See, our challenge is huge. Our challenge goes beyond how we interact and do we have a smile, do we not bully people. Our challenge is beyond do we help take care of other people. You know what our challenge is? Our true challenge and calling in life is not just to be good, because we know we can't ever really be good. Our challenge is to actually be more like Jesus. And if our standard, if our goal has been to be good, it's far below our real calling, which is to be like Christ. So, this is why the 9th word sums up 20 years of studies. It encourages me and challenges me simultaneously, because the word is spirituality. People who thrive, yes, they have those first 8 characteristics, but they have the 9th one, spirituality, religiosity. And as I read it, I was like, wow, scientific proof that thriving, growing, positive people at their core understand the value of their soul. They understand there's something beyond me. And it's not merely piety. It's not merely just being a religious person in repetition, but according to the etymology of the word, these people have a grasp of their soul's purpose. To thrive, according to Old Norse, is do you grasp, do you understand why you exist? Do you really understand what God wants to do in and through you? It's not plain church. It's about God really invading your space and saying, I'm calling you to something. What is that something? So what did 2020 do to your soul? Did you grow your purpose, or did you shrink back from your purpose? Did you grow in generosity, or did you shrink back in generosity? And when I had this question written down, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to get an email from somebody that's like, okay, Pastor Carlos, this is not about just generosity and giving. No, I understand, but you got to understand, I grew up with 2 poor grandmothers who were both single moms. And one of my grandmothers was a migrant worker who raised her kids in the fields, and they picked the food that we eat. You know, my grandmother told me growing up, every time we'd go to give, and this is where my parents did it too, every time we were in church and we went to give, my grandmother or my mom or my dad, whoever was sitting next to me, they all grew up really poor, and they would give. And every time they did, you know what they said? I'm not giving for me. I'm giving so that future generations will understand what it means to be generous. And my grandmother, who was poor, who was a migrant worker, was the most generous person I knew. And how many of us grew in generosity this last year? Because a lot of you did. I'm blown away by how many of you stepped up in generosity and how many of us shrunk back in generosity. Did you grasp everything that God had for you? At the beginning of this message, you heard a video by Darius Thomas, who's, again, guy I love. He attends our North Campus. And Darius, I know you're watching online. We're so glad. And Darius actually wrote me a card. And in the card, he was just sharing about his year. And I called Darius and I said, hey, would you be willing to do a video card to Gateway Church, your church? He did. He made the video himself. That's what he does, he's a videographer. And I wanted to read something he wrote in the card that I thought was really impactful to me, and it's why I asked him to do the video. He writes, and then he says this: this could have been a time of darkness, sadness, or even depression. But being around everyone the last few months and serving, being around everyone the last few months, he was here every week and serving, I can truly say God has been more than good. And I got to say, Darius, I think Darius understood and took grasp of the purpose of his soul. See, we all do what we have to do to survive. And there's times we all shrink back. There's times we all step back from our true purpose. There's sometimes we self-sabotage. There are times we do things we know we shouldn't do, but we're just trying to survive. And many of us have faced a lot of horrible things, and we learned some survival tactics. In 2020, we were triggered by some of these things, and those survival tactics came back to life, and we survived. But I'm asking you again, what does it truly mean to thrive in 2021? So let's go to Scripture, Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1 through 3. And we're going to read this, and we're going to walk away with 6 things that we're really challenged with and how to thrive as we run our race set before us. Here we go. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses to the life of faith, let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up. And let us run with endurance the race God has set before us. And we do this by keeping our eyes on Jesus, the champion who initiates and perfects our faith. Because of the joy awaiting him, he endures the cross, disregarding its shame. Now he is seated in the place of honor beside God's throne. Think of all the hostility he endured from sinful people. Then you won't become weary and give up. So what are the things we learned in this passage? How do we thrive as we run this race that seems to be changing every week, every month, every time we turn on the news, every time we read an article? The first thing it says is cast off the weight. Cast off every weight. Now, I take that as a literal challenge. I need to cast off the extra 10 pounds that I gained, right? Never mind the 5 pounds before that I needed to lose. Now I've got 15. I'm in a real deficit. I've got to cast off the weight, but it's more than that. What are things that really bog you down that you need to get rid of? Do you really need the extra glass of wine? Do you really need the extra time on social media? Do you really need the extra 4 hours of football after you've already watched 20? It's okay. You can hit your husband if he's sitting next to you right now, okay? It's okay. My wife, when we first got married, it was Saturday night, 11:30 at night, and I'm watching SportsCenter, and she says, you know, we're newlyweds. I'm like, I know. She's like, why are you watching SportsCenter when I'm right here? I'm like, well, it's football. She's like, I think it's weird that I'm your new bride and you want to spend time watching football. I'm like, yes, because SportsCenter puts on that show just for me. I'm the only guy in America right now watching SportsCenter. And this happened for a few months, and finally I said, let's call your brothers right now. Let's see what they're doing. Fine. We called her 2 brothers. What were they doing at the same time? Watching SportsCenter. But how much SportsCenter do I really need to watch? How many times do I have to replay that movie, that show, that thing I keep adding to my plate, to my time? I keep saying I don't have time, but I keep adding things to my plate that rob me of my time. What are things in my life that I need to cast off? What are things I'm doing that I no longer need to do? Because when we cast off weight, there's a freedom that comes in that. In high school, I had a basketball coach who moved from New York City. And my dad's from New York City, so I can say this. He thought he knew everything because he's from New York. You know, those New Yorkers and Californians that are moving to Texas? God, we love you. We're so glad you're here. We really are. But there's a way we do things in Texas. There's the way we drive, there's the way we eat, there's the way we talk. And this guy moved in, he was our new basketball coach, and he wanted to do a new way of training us to play basketball. And it meant we weren't in the gym for 2 months. We were out running every day in our high tops, and we were running through dirt and sand, and we only played sand volleyball and ran in the sand. And I was sick of it. I was tired of it. I'm not doing this anymore. I want to have fun. I'm 16 years old, and I finally go into the coach. I'm like, this is ridiculous. Yeah, because I was that 16-year-old kid who had that vibrato, and I was like, this is dumb. I don't think you know what you're doing. And I'm like, telling my coach, he doesn't know what he's doing. It's like, just stick with it. I promise it's going to work out. Within 2 weeks, we're done running in the dirt. We're done running in the sand. We finally get back in the gym. And we were wearing big baggy clothes. He made us wear all this stuff. It was crazy. And we get in the gym, and we put on regular basketball clothes. And we're in the gym. And everybody feels so much lighter. Because now we're running on a floor. And now we're not running in the sand, feeling like we don't know what we're doing. We took off all the heavy clothes. Now we have light clothes on. And we felt like we could jump out of the gym because when we cast off the weight, there was a freedom to be what we were meant to be, basketball players. And as we read this passage, it says, cast off every restraint, every weight that's on you. I wonder if you could take some time to ask yourself the question, what can I stop doing that is not helping me move forward? The second thing it says is cast off the sin. So I got to cast off weight, and I'm going to cast off sin. And I want to make this very clear for people. Not everything that bogs us down is sinful, is wrong. There's just some things that bog us down that distract us, that keep us from running our race. But the second thing it says, and cast off the sin. Cast off those things that keep us from relationship with God. Cast off those things that erode our very soul that we're talking about. James 4:17 says this, we read it a few weeks ago. Remember, it is sin to know what you ought to do and then not do it. It is sin to know what you ought to do and then not do it. How many times in 2020 did you ever thought, I should do this for my neighbor? I should do this for my roommate. I should do this for my teacher. I should do this for my parents. It's COVID. They won't ever know. But we don't understand is every time we have that thought and the Spirit of God is trying to woo you and speak to you and you ignore that, it begins to sear your conscience. It begins to sear your soul. How about we begin to step into what is right when we know something is right and we know something is wrong, we cast it off and we lay it at the feet of Jesus. To cast off weight and cast off sin. And I know for some of us that word can be very hurtful. What is sin? Or maybe you grew up in church and somebody used that word to just beat you over the head, but I'm telling you, sin, plain and simple, is the very thing that just keeps you from a growing relationship with Jesus Christ. It's what separates us from God. And I wonder, could we just cast those things off? Can we acknowledge what those things are? I had an email last week, actually I had several emails, as you know, we were going into the new year, and people just saying, Pastor Carlos, I really feel like I should stop doing this, or I really need help with this, or I need really help with that. And you could tell the people who were writing these emails, it took a lot of effort for them to acknowledge something about my life is not right. Something about my life is out of whack. Something about my life does not line up with the values that God has for me. Something about my life is keeping me from thriving. And so those of you who did that, those of you who acknowledge every week in the STEPS program and recovery and the things that you're doing, I want to exhort you. I want to encourage you. I want to challenge you. Keep putting those things at the feet of Jesus, because when we cast off weight and we cast off sin, we become lighter and more able to line ourselves up with God's purpose for our life. As the great theologian Tina Turner said, whatever is bringing you down, get rid of it. Because you'll find that when you're free, your true self comes out. Now, I wish I could tell you your true self is all roses. We have a few people who've given their lives to Christ in this last year, as they're growing in their faith, they'll come and talk to me, or they'll email somebody on the staff and say, I gave my life to Jesus and everything is falling apart. Everything is falling apart. My marriage is falling apart. My business, my job, everything's falling apart. And we have to understand and walk with people and say, yeah, because your true self is coming out. And when you acknowledge that, some of those things that are your true self are toxic. That's the bad news. But the good news is those things that come out that are toxic, when they come out, we lay them out at the feet of Jesus. We no longer have to carry them. They're now out of who we are. They no longer are part of who we are. So we cast off weight. We cast off sin. Number 3, we run with endurance. Are you in this for the long haul? That's the question. You run with endurance. Endurance doesn't mean you run as fast as you can. Those of you who are engaged, about to get married, are you really in it for the long haul? Are you in it just to the wedding day and the first year so you can post all your pictures on Instagram? Are you in it so everybody can say how great your wedding was? Well, nobody's going to acknowledge that, but how are you preparing for the long haul? Are you going to counseling? Are you asking for wisdom in your relationship? How are you preparing yourself for the run of endurance? We run understanding there's a long road ahead of us. Some of us are going to get stimulus checks in the coming days, and maybe you already did. Do you plan your finances, your marriage, your life with endurance, understanding, I know Walmart has those TVs on sale for $4.99. They're smart that way. Don't fall for it. Run with endurance. Have a mindset that leads towards the future. And as we run with endurance, number 4, we run the right race. It's funny to me as I'm reading that passage. It says, and we run with endurance the race God has set before us. We don't run our race. We don't run the race we want to race. We run the race that God has set before us. That's the race we run. And how many times are we running the race and we're like, okay, God, I'm done with my 2 laps, I'm done. God's like, yeah, but I called you to run a mile. There's 2 more laps. But God already did my 2 laps. And we spend more time arguing about having our way than we actually do doing the thing that God's called us to do. We run with endurance because it takes endurance to finish the race set before us. And when God challenges us, it's not a day at a time or a month at a time or a year at a time. It's a challenge that's a lifetime at a time. Number 5, we keep our eyes on Jesus. Jesus, it says this, the champion. He's the champion who initiates and perfects our faith because of the joys awaiting him. He endured the cross, disregarding its shame. Now he is seated in the place of honor beside God's throne. We keep our eyes on Jesus, the one who already ran the perfect race, the one who is our challenge, the one who is our true target. That's who we're trying to emulate, Jesus. Not so we can walk in perfection, but so that we can finish the race set before us. And how do we do that? We focus on him. How do we focus? Why do we focus? I don't know why this came to my mind. I'm kind of showing my true colors here. But in 1999, I started watching romantic comedies with my wife. She was my girlfriend at the time. And I hated romantic comedies. And now we're hooked on them. And there was a movie called The Runaway Bride. Julia Roberts was in that movie, and Richard Gere was in the movie. And Runaway Bride is this phenomenon about this lady who got engaged multiple times, and every time at the altar, she left her husband. And this journalist finds out about this, so he finds out she's engaged. So he goes to her small town to figure out, is she going to get married this time? And in the process of all that happening, what do you think happens? The journalist falls in love with the bride. And he's going to be the one that marries her. So the wedding day comes, all the pomp and circumstance, and he has this theory. If you keep your eyes on me, from the time you walk in, all the way down the aisle, keep your eyes on me, keep your eyes on me, we're going to make it. So she's walking down the aisle. She has her eyes set on the groom, Richard Gere. She's gonna walk down the aisle, and it's working, and everybody's in awe. Oh my gosh, she's actually going to get married. After so many engagements, she's going to actually do it. And she gets there, somebody takes a picture, the groom blinks, they lose eye contact, she runs away. And you might be thinking, what a stupid analogy. I know, it's a stupid analogy. You wanna know what's even more stupid? The fact that we are that bride. We are the bride who loses focus on the groom. And Ephesians 5 calls us the body, a family. We are the bride, and we have the tendency to run away when things get hard. And we have a tendency to lose our focus and take our eyes off the groom. And Jesus is the groom saying, keep your eyes on me, keep your focus on me. We're gonna get there together. I know you failed in the past. I know you have fallen short, but keep your eyes on me. And then number 6, keep your eyes on me so you don't give up. 1 Corinthians 9:24. Do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. Philippians 1:6. Being confident of this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion to the day of Jesus Christ. You keep focus. You don't quit. You don't quit because there is victory on the other side. There's thriving on the other side. There is a hope and a future if you do not give up. And I've already acknowledged it. Everything we're facing isn't going to go away today. Even with a mindset change to thrive, the circumstances don't change, but you know what can change? Our ability to be in it for the long haul. Our ability to say we're going to grow in our faith. We're going to grow in different areas because God is calling us to. I was going to share a story with you of a couple here at Gateway that really inspired me this year, the Rieger family. But instead of sharing the story, we asked them to come in and to shoot the story for us. So watch this video with me.
I'm Justin Rieger. I've been in the Austin area for over 30 years.
And I'm Melissa Rieger. I was born in Baltimore, Maryland. And 2019's amazing, right? Like it was really good. Our marriage was in a really good place. Financially, I had taken a promotion and was traveling, and life was great. The kids were healthy, they were doing well, they were doing sports, and they were doing things in school. In February of 2020, I was really just started getting anxiety. Leaving Justin, leaving the kids, I was missing their special moments, traveling during their birthdays, just not being present during their school functions. I started, praying, am I doing the right thing? I'm leaving my family. I'm so anxious when I'm in California because I'm not with my family. So I really just started praying on whether that role was right for me. But as soon as I came back, COVID happened. Along with, I'm sure, a lot of other companies here in Austin during a pandemic, we had to furlough and reduce hours for hundreds of employees. And I really feel like I was in the right place at the right time where God needed me to, touch other people's lives, help them through circumstances that they were going through, and just be exactly where I needed to be. At home, Justin's starting not to feel well.
I was showing signs and symptoms of an ulcer, basically. It was concerning. I wanted to find out what was going on. So I scheduled a doctor's appointment in early June. It was a week after that appointment, I went and had a test done, expecting an ulcer result. And that's when I was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer. What's going to happen with my kids? What's going to happen with my wife? What are they going to do if I'm not here?
We were in such a great place with our marriage and our family unit. So I was a little upset that, this was happening to Justin. But we quickly started praying together, praying with our family, had friends come over and pray with us and family pray with us, and quickly turned from anger to, okay, this is not going to be the end of our story. We were continually being so faithful, and this is, God was blessing our marriage. We can go and help other people with our story. We felt that urge and that tug and that calling to start tithing, but we didn't see, that this was going to happen to us.
As we began to tithe, the God winks would come, sometimes in people and sometimes in situations. And we just knew, all right, we're being faithful. God's faithful back to us. We paid our home off and every debt that we had in October of 2020.
We are so thankful that we followed through with that and we're tithing.
What I would say to people hearing our story is the easy road might be to give up in a marriage or in your finances or anything like that. Even during the hard times, the hardest times a lot of times make the marriage and your situation even stronger. Don't give up. But if you stick with it, God will bless you more than you could ever imagine.
I heard their story, and I knew we were going to be recording it. And I was like, wow, here you have a family, 2019 is a great year. It's a banner year for them. And then they start having some family issues, and he gets sick in the middle of all it. I mean, they're leaders in our student ministry. They love students. They serve at our North Campus, and then they start tithing and giving. And at first I was like, what does that have to do with your cancer? What is that? But it was their journey. Their journey of their finances, their journey of their physical health, their journey of their marriage, the journey in serving. And what a year. And I wanted to tell you something happened a couple days after we shot this story. Not only were we celebrating that in the middle of all this, that they started tithing and giving, they became debt-free in 2020. And not only debt-free, Justin got word that he's cancer-free. How amazing is that? And I thought about the Rieger family as like kind of being a standard for us in the middle of difficulty to do what's right, to cast off the traveling and the big job and all the stuff and just say, God, what do you want me to do? And I'm going to do it and I'm going to be faithful because you're going to be faithful back to us however you choose to do that, God. And that's what we want as a church, to go from surviving to thriving. And I'm going to ask you, is that what you want in this year? Let us partner together and let's all grow to be what God's intended us to be. God, thank you for your goodness. I thank you for your mercy that extends over us. And yeah, I thank you, God, that in the middle of all this, you're saying, okay, let's shift the mindset. We've made it. We're here. Some of us barely. Some of us have lost loved ones in the last year. Some of us have lost jobs or lost homes. It's not been all rosy for everybody, God. We understand that there's so much happening in our church body. But today we make a commitment to thrive in our soul, that our soul would be alive in 2021, that our soul would come to life as we connect with you, that our soul would come to life as we disregard and cast off all restraint and we focus our attention on you, because there is victory on the other side and you are on the other side. It's in Jesus' name we pray this. Amen.